We're going to speak now to Tim Ringo. Tim is from Maxim Consulting. Tim, what exactly do you do, and how do these figures affect what you do?
Good morning, Eamon. My background is in human resources. I've spent about 20 years helping organizations become more effective in terms of how they look at recruiting and deploying talent. And so it's something I've looked at for a number of years. I've also just recently written a book called Calculating Success on Harvard Business Review, which looks at workforce analytics and how do organizations get the supply and demand right of their talent in terms of how they deploy it, which I think is very relevant at the moment. A lot of organizations are very concerned about this, obviously.
Well, there's a lot of supply out there, surely that bit's quite easy.
Well, it is, and the good news is there's lots of good talent out there, and I think organizations should be looking to see how they can tap into it. I've seen a lot of organizations, both big and small, start to tap into the younger market, for instance, starting to create more apprenticeships. So, for instance, my small firm, we've been using internships with recent college graduates and getting them in and training them up on how to become consultants and work with our clients, and that's worked really well. And a lot of my clients themselves have actually been hiring young people in as interns and training them up, and I think this apprenticeship idea is a very good one. I think that's something that the government can support and something that businesses can support.
But so many people, Tim, say that however good the labour pool is out there, it is just very difficult to hire people in this country, that the government themselves, they don't make it easy. There are too many penalties and restrictions when it comes to hiring.
Well, I think it's certainly something to be looked at. I think creating some flexibility in the labor pool, both for employees and for the employer, I think would be a really good thing. In terms of specifics around labor law, that isn't one of my expertise, but I do think there can be more flexibility on both sides, and there are certain elements, for instance, in the American model that might be applicable. But I think that on both employees and employers, there should be a little bit more flexibility in terms of people being able to move around within an organization, but also into other organizations.
So when these figures are announced come 9:30 today, do you actually see it as an opportunity on both sides for supply and demand?
I do, but one thing I think that organizations need to get better at, and that's whether they're big companies or small companies, I think they have to get better at getting away from this whole idea of hire and firing binges. This idea that in the good times we're going to hire lots of people, and in the bad times we're going to get rid of lots of people. Companies that perform very well, and we see this in the research in my book, that they essentially create a more flat profile, that they don't do big hiring in the good times and get rid of people in the bad times. They tend to do a much more even profile, and we need to get out of this kind of hire and firing binge. And I would put forward the premise that there could be literally hundreds of thousands of people more employed right now if organizations had a better grip on the supply and demand of their talent, and they got rid of this idea of sort of binging in the good and bad times.
Tim, appreciate your take on those things. Thank you very much indeed. That's Tim Ringo from Maxim Consulting. Those unemployment figures out 9:30 this morning.